I will do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, welcome. So what in fact this person needs perhaps is a place as a space which is judgment free, which is, future focused, and he or she feels empathetic. He can trust someone whom he can talk to or she can talk to, get some very unbiased views, unbiased ideas, and a space that is really safe and empowering for them so that they can find the strength, the resourcefulness for them to move ahead. Now, that's exactly what coaching is all about. It creates a space that can provide some clear thinking and also help person think fearlessly and thought provokingly, get some insights, get some goal oriented actions going. So ultimately, the purpose of coaching is to make the coachee feel empowered and feel resourceful. And many of you who are coaches have already heard this many times in your coaching journeys, right? Now let's look at how coaching is positioned when compared with other support functions. And here's a schematic view of how it all fits in. So let's say we are here right now, and we all have past issues, past problems, and all of us are looking forward to the future, and we want to be solution oriented. We want to find solutions to our challenges, our problems, our issues. And if you look at asking versus telling, right? Asking on one axis, one end of the axis, and telling on the other end of the axis. Let's see how many different support functions fit in. Now, for example, we all have heard about therapy, right? Now, therapy falls right here on the left side, where it's more about dealing with the past problems, uncovering past traumas, addressing mental wellness issues, and repairing some past damage. And it typically is very telling in nature. So the therapist actually sits across the table and tries to, grope into the mind of the client and tries to uncover all of these traumas and give them advice, give them directions, and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you look at counseling, right, counseling is also got to do with dealing with emotional and intellectual experiences of the past, creating some psychological well-being and so on and so forth. So that's where counseling sits. And it's also about a little bit about asking, but a lot of telling and advising, right? Now, if you look at training, for example, training, of course, is future focused. It is preparing the participants in terms of giving them new skills, new capabilities, right? So there's a lot of knowledge sharing that happens from the trainer to the trainees. So that's where training sits. It is, of course, future focused, but there's a lot of telling and advising happening. Consulting, on the other hand, is coming from I know better, right? The consultants are experts in their fields, they have vast, deep knowledge. So they come in, they look at the problem, analyze, and then give advice. And usually the client executes the advice. Mentoring, again, is future focused, of course, and it's largely based on someone who is more experienced sharing their experience and wisdom to someone who's not yet gone through that experience, right? So there's a lot of advising, there's a lot of guidance, there's a lot of hand holding, and also sometimes overseeing implementation. So there's a lot of support and scaffolding that happens in mentoring. Facilitation, again, is future focused, very competence building in nature, right? Creating future readiness. And it is mostly about collaborative learning in a group. But if you look at coaching, right? Coaching is right there on the top, which is extremely future focused, and it is mostly about asking to build deep awareness, right? A coach rarely gives any advice, right? The coach asks very insightful questions to deepen the awareness of the coachee and make the client feel more resourceful, because the person who has come up with a problem also has the ability to solve it. Just that they don't know what needs to be done and how to go about it. So that is exactly what the coach tries to do by engaging in a thought-provoking manner with the client. So it empowers, leaves the client empowered, and also sometimes help them to, plan out their actions and hold them accountable throughout the execution part. So that's what a coach does. And that's how coaching is very, very different and unique from the other support functions. And not for a moment saying that the others are less important, because many of us here actually wear many of these hats, right? Multiple hats. Like, for example, I'm a facilitator. I also do some amount of consulting and mentoring. So not to take away the great work that these professionals do, but coaching has that unique power to provide that safe space for anyone who's wanting to look at becoming more resourceful, right? Having said that, having seen where coaching fits in this scheme of things, now the question comes in. So is coaching something that can that someone can train to become, right? So can someone become a coach? And the answer, of course, is yes. And therefore, the next question would be, so is this really a science or is this an art? What is it really, right? So there are a lot of these questions that come up to people who get curious about coaching. So is coaching a science or is it an art? How many of you here think it is one of these, science or art, or any other views that you have about coaching? I know many of you have come here to know what coaching is, but what does really it look like for you?
Both.
Sorry?
It is both.
No, it's both. And Caroline there says it's a scientific art. It's a fantastic way of expressing. Caroline, thanks. Yeah, it's both. So it's definitely both. And if you see, even if you look at the ICF definition of coaching, ICF is the International Coaching Federation, which is a global body for coaches. So ICF defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process, right? That inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So it is both thought provoking, meaning it is cognitive in nature. It can be analyzed, it can be studied, there could be a body of knowledge that can be developed around it. And at the same time, it is also very a creative process, right? And that there is already a cognizance of the fact that it is both science and an art. So let's for a moment try and examine, at least for those of you who are already on the journey of becoming a coach, or someone who's curious to know what is the scientific part of coaching. So here are some things that can help us look at it from that perspective. So there are many different schools and approaches to coaching. As we know, there is something called as a brain-based approach, which is the neuroscience of coaching, which looks at what is the brain activity that client undergoes when one is being coached. Ontological coaching is very body-based, right? Like what are the body experiences that one undergoes, and so on and so forth. There is emotional intelligence approach to coaching, positive psychology, positive intelligence. So there are many, many different approaches, different schools that have studied coaching and have a body of knowledge that can guide you through that. And then on top of that, you have different coaching modalities. So different routes to get to the problem. So there is a neuro-linguistic programming, there is transactional analysis, there is gestalt, there's growth mindset, and so many others like appreciative inquiry and psychodrama. Many different modalities that look at coaching and find make coaching possible. And then comes the coaching models and frameworks. So there are many, many different coaching models and frameworks. Many of you may be familiar with some of these here. Grow is a very popular one, which has been there around for many, many years now, many decades now, and many coaches really grew up learning about grow. Some of us use grow as a model in many other spheres of leadership as well. right? Grow stands for what's the goal, what is the current reality, what are the options you have, and what are you willing to uh, to get towards it. So that and many other models will give us some direction towards coaching. Now, this covers broadly what the scientific part of coaching is. Now, if you look at the art part, for example, so for a moment, let's step in and look at what's the art side of coaching. Now, I would like to bring in coaching models and frameworks back here because I believe that frameworks are both scientific and also very creative in nature. So I would like to put this back here. And on top of it, I'd like to I'd like to look at coaching tools. So there are many different coaching tools that are designed that a coach can use when they are coaching a client. And many of you may have use this or may be familiar with it, or if not, you may become curious and want to research on them. So the Wheel of Life is a very popular tool. Meraki is another new tool, which Abhyudaya is promoting. In fact, Jaya is one of the architects of this model. Cartesian questions, appreciative inquiry, many different coaching tools available for coaches, which are extremely creative in nature. And then comes the coaching competencies, right? Where ICF has gone ahead and defined what coaching behavior should be. There are 8 different competencies defined by ICF. There are so many other coaching bodies around the world that have defined their own coaching competencies. So as you can see, that there is a whole body of science, there's a body of research that's going on about coaching, and there's also it's developing into an art, right? It's in my mind it's more like cooking, right? You know that cooking, of course, if you ask, is cooking a science or an art? Of course there is some method to it, right? There are some ingredients, there is some measurements, there is some cooking time and all of that. At the same time, if 2 people were to use the same recipe and create a dish, I'm sure you'll agree that the taste would differ, right? Now that's the art part of cooking. So cooking, coaching is very, very similar to that. But then uh, we've tried to look at coaching as a science and coaching as an art. But the next question, really, in my mind, is when does coaching become a craft? Or better still, how does a coach make his or her coaching skills a craft? Of course, they know the science, they have been trained, they have been credentialed, and they've been doing this for many years, for example. So it is getting developed as an art. But when does it really become a craft? Right? Now, that's the question that that's the centerpiece of what we're going to look at in our webinar today. So, in my mind, what happens between a coach and a client in that conversation has got a lot to do with what is happening inside of the coach. So the what of the conversation, or the what of the impact that the coach is able to create for a client, really depends on who the coach really is. And that, I think, is worthy for us to examine. I can hear a lot of background noise. Could we please mute our microphones?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, so we're saying that what happens in a coaching conversation, rather than what happens between the coach and the client, really depends on who the coach is or what's going on inside the coach. Now, let me explain this a little more. Um, okay. Okay. I believe that coaching happens in 3 different levels. And by levels, I don't mean the levels that coaches are familiar with, the ACC, the PCC, or the MCC, but I think there's something much deeper. And the first thing that many of us as coaches operate at is the head, right? And all of us are gifted with an intellect, so we are very analytical. That's how we are used to approaching any problem. So, you know, the coach coming from one's head means that, one has undergone training, one is properly credentialed, they've gone through many certifications, for example, they know all the tools, all the frameworks, the modalities. So there's a lot of training that has gone in. And therefore, when they approach a client, they will be looking at, let's say, they will be listening to the facts, they will be trying to analyze the facts themselves, they will look for repeated phrases, they look for language, they look for intonation. So all of these, tangible, logical things that happens in a coaching conversation is what operating from the head means. And I once was mentoring a coach, and she happened to play a coaching conversation for me, and I noticed that she asks her client, the client has expressed his problem, and the coach says, okay, I'd like you to pull out an Excel sheet and put down all your issues here, right? Now, it's a fantastic way of taking stock of what's going on in the client's mind. But the question is, who is it serving, right? So if the coach is operating at a head level, then the coaching conversation would be very transactional. I'm not saying it's not going to be effective. It may be effective, but it will be at a very transactional level. But what happens at the heart level? So let's say if the coach is able to go deeper inside and able to work on their emotional part, right? So they're able to develop curiosity, and curiosity is a big thing in coaching, coming from a space not of wanting to intrude into the client's life, but actually from a place of not knowing what's going on, right? So curiosity is purely from coming from not knowing. And motivation, the coach's motivation to go deeper, and their own emotional awareness, so that they don't get entangled in the feelings that their client is going through. So, well, how does it express itself in the with the client? So the coach is able to demonstrate a lot of empathy. They can come from a judgment-free space. They're able to build very healthy rapport with the client. The trust gets built very quickly, and also being operating from the heart also will support them to connect the dots that the head is processing, right? And that's also a great level of coaching. But I think what goes deeper even is the soul, right? Now that is at the core of who the coach is. And here, coach brings in his or her own reflections from their previous coaching conversations and what they have learned through their conversations, plus the mentoring and the supervision they go through, developing their own skill for intuition, right? And also being able to bring in a presence, a coaching presence into the conversation, and also be comfortable with silence. Now, coaching is a space where the coach has to be comfortable with silence in the conversation. And silence here could also mean silencing their own, inner dialogue that's going on in our heads, right? Now, that's what going deeper into into the soul means. And how would that translate for a coach, for a client? So that would help the coach to be fearless in the way he or she asks questions. They can go ahead and challenge beliefs of the client. They can explore what values matter to the client. And in a way, they're able to even see light at the end of the tunnel that perhaps the client is not able to see, right? So believing in the ability of the client can happen if the coach is operating at a very deep, at the soul level. Now, the question therefore is, um, how do you nourish your coaching soul, right? And coaching at a soul level is truly transformation. So if that is so, how does a coach nourish one's coaching soul? And to me, the one-line answer for this question comes from the Indian scriptures. And I want to go back to a familiar source, the Taittiriya Upanishad in the Indian scriptures. There is one line which says, Swadhyaya pravachanabhyam na pramaditavyam. And that, loosely translated, means do not relinquish, or do not give up self-study and practice, right? Now, if you look at this one single line, it is extremely powerful. And it's not surprising that, the ICF competency really captures it in some way. So if you look at the ICF competency number 2, which actually comes very close to defining the being of the coach, the the competency says, the name of the competency is embodies coaching mindset. And what it really means is that the coach is able to develop and maintain a mindset that is open, curious, flexible, and client centered, right? And all these four are very, very essential for a coach to be effective: open, curious, flexible, and client centered. Now it goes on and defines what this competency really is, right? Acknowledging the client, and the client is responsible for their choices, ongoing learning and development. So the competency also says, um, for a coach to be effective, for a coach to have the coaching mindset, there has to be an ongoing learning and development. There has to be a lot of reflective practice that the coach is engaging in. The coach should be aware of and also open to influences of context and culture and all of that. Um, Also aware of one's own self and one's intuitions, being able to use one's intuitions for the benefit of the client, and uh, being in control of one's own emotions, not get entangled with the emotions of the client is bringing in, and also prepare oneself fully, both mentally and emotionally, for sessions. And of course, be open to seeking outside help from senior coaches, from mentors, from supervisors, and so on and so forth. So all of these are actually defined and prescribed in the ICF competency, right? And many of these are behavioral nature, and they actually get captured in many other competencies, in the rest of the 8 competencies as well. Therefore, for some of us who are on the coaching journey, what is the coaching mantra that we keep hearing constantly from our mentors and supervisors, teachers? So, simply put, what they're saying is that, look, if you're a coach, it's not your agenda, right? You're not there to talk about your agenda, it's the client's agenda, right? You're focusing on the client's agenda. The direction and the pace of the conversation is actually decided by the client, not the coach, right? So the client is the centerpiece of the conversation. And the coach is encouraged to go with what the client wants to accomplish and what is meaningful for the client, right? Remain free from judgment. Um, do not offer advice or suggestions or directions, because what may be good for you may not be good for the client, right? And also be open to getting mentored and supervised, and take your confusions and questions to someone who's a senior mentor or a supervisor, get them clarified. And of course, engage in ongoing learning, development, reflective practice. Be curious, use your intuition, listen actively, and very, very importantly, be able to silence your own inner dialogue, right? And it's so important for the coach to maintain one's presence in a conversation. If there's a lot of inner dialogue that's going on, that can distract the coach from being fully present and being able to fully listen actively in the coaching conversation. And also be comfortable with silence. Many moments in a coaching conversation where a client needs a lot of time to reflect on the question, or think, go deeper. And one should be comfortable with that silence as a coach. So if you see, the ones in black here are actually the doing of the coach, right? What is the coach supposed to do? And the ones in the blue are actually the being of the coach, right? What does a coach need to be in order to be an effective coach? Now, that to me is the heart and soul of being a coach. And going back to our question of, where do you find nourishment for the soul? There are many different sources. Here are some that I have found to be very, very useful. Um, these are very powerful books. They come with a lot of powerful ideas for coaches to read and absorb. And that, I'm sure, would help coaches to sharpen their saw as coaches. So there are many more sources as well of inspiration. Uh, but for those of us who are very keen and who want to go further deep, I go to my very familiar source, which is the Bhagavad Gita. And if you were to look at even the most popular shloka from the Gita, which is Karmanyeva Adhikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachana Ma Karma Phala Hetur Bhuhu Ma Te Sangostva Karmani. So the translation there is, your right is only to work, right? Never for its fruits, never towards its fruits. And what is a coach doing? The coach is asked to focus on the client, right? Your right is only to coach, but not to see that you find a solution for your client. Finding a solution for the client is the client's issue, not the coach's issue. And let therefore let your coaching conversation not be motivated by finding the solution. And hence, and also, uh, let it not be just doing it for the sake of doing, right? Let it also not be something that you would just get in very casually. So let it not be one of inaction as well, right? So there's a lot of inspiration for a coach from this single source, and there are many more. And here's another shloka that comes to my mind, which is extremely useful, and not just for a coach, but for any of us here. Which says, Adveshta Sarvabhutanam Maitra Karanayocha. Someone who has no hatred towards other creatures, who is friendly, who is compassionate. So a coach has to step into a conversation without any attachment to likes or dislikes, pleasure or pain, and be compassionate towards the client. And that can only happen if one can get out of likes and dislikes, right? So therefore, there's a need for the coach to be free from attachment and also free from ego, right? I know best. I know I'm going to advise you. So that cannot happen for a coach to be effective, and someone who has to be very balanced. So many, many different inspirations coming from this one book, the Gita. This one, equipoised in pleasure and pain, gain and loss, victory and defeat, sukha dukkhe same kritva, labha labha jaya jayo. And also, amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, shantirarjavam, which is the qualities of a. In fact, these are actually qualities of a student of Vedanta, or a sadhak, as they say. But to me, it actually applies so closely to what a coach is expected to be, and hence they remain forever inspirational for me as a coach as well, right? Humility, unpretentiousness, and forgiving. So these are some inspirations and some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. So to sum it all up, what is the being of a coach, right? What is the being of the coach? So coaching, I think, is a state of being that is mindful, that is empathetic, deliberate, intuitive, transformative, affirmative, trusting, and working. And these, I believe, are the essential qualities that go into making a coach go deeper. And that is the real being of the coach, not diluting or discounting what happens for in their learning, in their training, in their credentialing, in their certification, in their practice, and all of that is very essential. But I think essentially the core of the coach is this. And um, I feel that a coach is the one who actually gets beneficial in any coaching conversation. So more than the client, I think the coach undergoes a lot of transformation if the coach is operating from their coaching soul. And that's the being of the coach. So that's it from me. I think we are right at the time 11:45. The next 15 minutes is meant for Q&A and any exchange of thoughts and ideas from you all. So thank you guys for being so patient and tolerating whatever I had to share. I'm open to any thoughts, any questions, anything that you wish to share.
Thanks, Yatish. Very, very powerful and thought-provoking session. Uh, Thank you for this.
Thank you, Sonal.
Thank you, Yatish. Indeed, insightful, no doubt about it. And the three stages that you talked about, the only thought that came to my mind that when you talk about souls, it goes metaphysically. And maybe mind is something that influences all the actions that we take. So that was the only thought that came by. So it is only about semantics, not really about the themes that you talked about. Very powerful and
Thank you, Sanjay.
and spot on, no doubt about
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. I hear you. Thank you. Uh, uh, well, so here's my one-line response, and if you are expecting one from me, I believe that any journey that goes within is spiritual, and you may call it by whatever name you choose, right? You may call it soul, you may call it mind, you may call it spiritual. I believe it is broadly spiritual in nature. In fact, even if you look at Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about four dimensions of development. He says head, heart, mind, and soul. So he is distinguishing between mind and mind and heart as well, right? To him, they are different. So there are different ways of looking at it, but Sanjay, really appreciate your view on that. But you can look at it from the view of going with it.
Thank you, Yatish.
Thanks, Sanjay. Really appreciate that view.
Hi, Yatish. I have a question.
Yeah, Rajesh.
Yeah. If you could share a little bit about intuition. You mentioned intuition in the last slide. How does one go about building intuition as part of our being?
That's a fantastic question. Um, at least from what I know, there is no direct solution to developing intuition. Right? You can't do certain exercises and then it's not like going to the gym and working on your weights and then you build your muscle. I think intuition is something that happens. The closest analogy that I can think of is wanting to, let's say you want to sleep. Now I lay down in bed, and if I'm trying to sleep, if I'm making a lot of effort to sleep, and sleep will still stay away from me, right? I will never be able to sleep at all. if I'm making an effort to sleep. But what I'm really doing when I go to bed is that I'm creating a conducive environment for sleep to happen, right? I'm keeping my gadgets away. I'm shutting the lights, creating the dark space, and the temperature of the room, and the bed being soft, and the covers being fluffy. So all of these are external circumstances that one creates for sleep to happen, and sleep happens. And I think intuition is very similar to that. Uh, you can never go and build intuition. I think intuition comes from being able to silence one's chatter, silence one's dialogue, being able to reflect upon one's previous coaching experiences, one's own thought patterns, one's own beliefs, values, what is influencing oneself as a coach, and what may be at play there, and trying to remain detached from all of this. So it's an exercise, or I mean, for a want of a better word, it's an exercise that happens internally. I don't know
Thanks,
if that
thanks a lot.
answers the question.
Thanks a lot, Yatish. It's a very good analogy about what you need to the system that you need to create for intuition to come forth to the force. So
Yeah.
evoking it in many ways rather than forcing it.
Yeah. The other reference that may be helpful here, Rajesh, is that if you look at all that is stated in our scriptures, let's say, our sages and saints were able to even um, give measurements of, let's say, the distance between Earth and the Sun, or the speed of the Earth's rotation. Uh, Now, many of this, how do you think they could have come up with it? They didn't have the science, they didn't have the instruments to measure this, they didn't have satellites, they didn't have any of this. How do you think they were able to come up with this? Now, they were able to silence themselves so much that they were able to attune the so-called individual mind to the cosmic mind. And when you go into the cosmic mind, I think the information is freely available there. And I think all our efforts to, let's say, mindfulness or meditation or everything else that we do is an effort to silence the inner chatter, so that we are able to attune our minds to the cosmic mind. And I think that is where true intuition happens.
Yeah, and I think just so that on that point, a lot of I think Marcia Reynolds says it, and other coaches also about um, being free to share what you sense. So when coaches say, I sense something, earlier it would seem like, oh, what are you doing? Is a woo-woo saying sensing. But it's about that silencing, like you speak about, and feeling something, and then being able to be courageous, as they say, to share that with client, to say something is what I'm sensing in the room, and is that right or not, and taking permission to discuss that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bang on. Yeah, many of these master coaches um, have mastered that art, mastered that the craft of being in a state of intuition.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rajesh. That's really precious what you shared. Sure. Thank you all. It's been great to have you all here. And if there are no more questions, truly appreciate you making time this morning to be here. More from a support perspective, I feel very encouraged to be sharing these thoughts and ideas with you. I hope you found some value in all of this. Thank you so much, and have a good day ahead.